Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, the subject of which is the government's energy white paper, which came out in December 2020. The subject of the white paper is to help the government in its plan to make energy cleaner and to make it more affordable to people. So before we get into the subject matter of our discussions, just by way of quick introduction, my name is Eddie Flanagan. I'm a partner with Shakespeare Martineau. And together with Mark Bartholomew, we head up the firm's electric vehicle offering. Now, our guest today is the very eminent Simon Villanueva, who is a legal director with Volvo Trucks, and he covers Southern and Western Europe. Now, I think anybody who knows Simon will agree that as our guest today, we're very lucky to have him, as he has an encyclopedic knowledge of all things automotive and the regulatory framework that surrounds that. So welcome, Simon.
Thank you, Eddie.
So just to get into our first question today, and the nitty-gritty really of the 10-point plan. Point 4 of that 10-point plan in the Energy White Paper sets out a timeline for the implementation of electric vehicles in the UK. I think everybody would suggest there's been a great deal of progress made thus far. Do you see this time frame as achievable, being that the government will rid the country of new sales in terms of petrol and diesel electric vehicles by 2030? So do you think that time limit's reasonable? And what drawbacks do you see in the time frame leading up to that?
Okay, so looking at point 4, there's quite a lot in there. So it talks about cars, it talks about the automotive supply chain, it talks about charging infrastructure, and it talks about freight trials. Coming from a truck manufacturer, apologies if I start at the sort of the back end of freight trials and work forward. We've already taken part in some freight trials. They were very successful. I think they're very successful for us. And that was in 2020, and that related to LNG vehicles. So not moving to electric, but reduced emissions through using LNG. In that area, we have, I think, the best product. Apologies for the little advert there, but our truck works on the diesel duty cycle, which is, so it drives like a normal diesel truck, which is familiar to our customers and works well. But the reason that has been so successful, and it's now our second biggest selling product, it's not the freight trial. The freight trial was helpful to kick it off, to get it in front of customers, but what helps it is the duty delta. So the duty on LNG is nowhere near the duty on petrol and diesel. So that's what helps it. So it needs more than just the trial to make these things work. So then if you apply that to our electric products, we've got electric trucks now, we've got FL and FE, which are our smaller products, are in the market. We will have a full range of electric trucks by 2022. So it's the now. And freight trials will be good. Again, they will help us, but only 70% of what we sell is a freight truck. 30% is your refuse truck, your fire engine, cranes, all sorts of other things. So it's only targeting part of our volume. So what do we need? We need more. They have effectively plug-in vehicle grants, which is what people will be familiar with on cars. But for a truck, it's £20,000 for the first 200, and then £8,000. It's not enough. These trucks are 4 times the price of the equivalent diesel product. So if we want anyone other than marketing departments to be buying these vehicles, we need more support. The industry needs more support from the government to make that happen, particularly by 2030. That's an aggressive timescale for trucks. It's a bit more achievable for cars, but I'll come on to cars in just a second. So the next point to talk about is infrastructure. This is a massive issue. For cars, I think we're getting there. We've all seen the infrastructure is there. The difficulty will always be houses without a drive for cars, because how do you traipse the cable across the curb? But for trucks, it's a whole different animal. The infrastructure, it needs to be huge. The the chargers are very powerful devices. If you're going to charge a truck in an hour, there's a lot of energy. And of course, the space you need to park around it is so much bigger. So the infrastructure is really the issue on the truck side. So to come back to the question, and apologies for a bit of it, 2030, sure. I think it's very nearly achievable for cars. I think cars we can see are well on the way. For vans, again, possibly achievable. Vans are typically shorter delivery, last mile delivery type stuff. But for trucks, it's going to need a lot more support to get to 2030. Now, that's not the ambition for trucks at the moment, but they are consulting about 2030 as part of the 10 steps. So, in summary, it's very aggressive. We can get there, but it will need support.
And I suppose that practical support is key as well, because whilst you'll need support in terms of manufacturing, you made a very good point there that the infrastructure for charging is essential as well. So we see all these trucks going up and down the motorways, but that they can do huge journeys over to the continent and back and so on and so forth. But they need that charging infrastructure, motorway services and the like, so that they can keep going, I take it. So that requires government investment in the infrastructure as well, I would suppose.
It does. I mean, just to give you an example, it's true of cars too, but for trucks, what we're seeing is if customers want to build, enough chargers to do 3, 4, 5 vehicles overnight, it's not just a case of them building that. There needs to be a new substation. It requires the network, the sort of the national grid to change. So it is very, very significant.
Okay, so looking at that, how does the change away from the normal internal combustion engine affect the truck, PSV, and other HGV vehicle sectors?
Well, in so many ways. So I guess the first thing I'd say is diesel is not dead.
Yeah.
So let's not write off diesel just yet. There's a huge park of diesel trucks out there, and changing a big fleet takes time. Takes time normally, because there are replacement cycles, but also takes even more time when we start thinking about the infrastructure issues that I'll talk about in a second. If I take PSVs first, because they're the easiest, it's really they're here now. PSV, hybrid PSV, electric PSV. That's really the here and now. That's normal. That's the normal product. The electric and hybrid product is more normal than diesel now, and that's because the electric drivetrain is well adapted to those sort of urban routes. They can have opportunity charging at bus stops. The pantograph comes down and can charge it. They're quiet. They're low emission. They're perfect for what they do. So they're really here now. There's no change there. Looking at electric in the truck sector, I mean, the initial products are very much urban vehicles again. So 300-kilometer range maybe. They need to come back to base to charge overnight. The capital cost is huge compared to a diesel. So businesses need to adapt. They need to adapt operationally in terms of their shift patterns to fit with charging, in terms of driving style. Driving everywhere with the air conditioning on affects the range. So there's things you need to think about. So more minor things are the vehicles will be spec'd to a duty cycle. So customers will say, I drive from Birmingham to Bristol, I need a truck for that. They'll get a truck for that does that. But then when they come to sell it, there's more limited customers that will buy that vehicle. So there's a whole mindset required. And then the other thing, as I mentioned, is infrastructure. It's huge. You need a lot of chargers. You need a charger. If you're going to do it overnight, you need a charger for every vehicle. You need an electric supply that's big enough to do that. You need the space to park all these vehicles when they're charging. It's not like a petrol pump where you pull up and pull away. You're there for an hour minimum. But it brings opportunities. So if you've got electric vehicles, electric charging, you can get solar panels. You can get a wind generator. You can operate in places that maybe you couldn't before. Underground in mines, there are opportunities that come with it too.
Great. Well, I mean, that's a very positive outlook from that regard, because I think we've seen it in the LCV sector, where people thought only a year ago, 18 months ago, that they wouldn't be able to do refrigerated light commercial vehicles. And now we see all these vans flying around, delivering vaccines, delivering medicines, and they're all EV LCVs. So technology has galloped forward in that regard, which is very encouraging. But I think when we think of electric vehicles, what we're really thinking of is non-ICE, so moving away from the internal combustion engine. So leaving electricity aside to one extent, do you see hydrogen as a compatible power source alongside battery power?
Yeah, so you can use, I believe, I'm not technical, but I believe you can use hydrogen in a couple of different ways. You can use it almost as a power source itself, or more typically, I think, as a fuel cell. In which case, it's generating electricity as you drive along. And we have recently entered into a joint venture with Daimler to develop fuel cells for transport. We clearly think it's the future, and why do we think that? I think, one, it's another version of electric. So it's an electric truck that generates its own power as it drives along. It will have an electric battery too. It will have a smaller amount, but it will have them for those sort of peak demand hills when you want to accelerate fast, etc. The real benefit of hydrogen there is it's diesel-like refueling. It's you pull in, you plug in the pipe, 5 minutes later you're away, fully recharged. So it has fantastic benefits. And of course, the only emissions from it is water. Yeah,
that's good. That's good. Well, I mean, we're seeing such dramatic change at almost breakneck speed. So, for example, with some of the diesel issues that we've seen in the press and some of the negative publicity around that, I think we've seen EV develop at a breakneck speed, which is really good. But just for our final question, and to sum things up, if you're scanning the horizon in the broadest terms, what other exciting changes do you see in these coming years that the industry will have to deal with, but also the opportunities they can make of that?
Well, again, as I said before, diesel's not dead. So there's still developments for diesel, or not just diesel, but diesel engine vehicles. So we've just launched in the last couple of years a turbo compound engine, which is breaking fuel consumption records, left, right, and centre. Fantastically efficient for the diesel engine, but still producing CO2. So not the end game. But then we've got Euro 7, which is coming, and that's the new emission standard. And what they're talking about there is possibly Euro 7 will be fossil free. So it's a diesel engine, but it's running on HVO, which is, I can't remember, but vegetable oil essentially, or biodiesel, or LNG. In our case, we can run a diesel engine on that. So that's benefit. There's huge CO2 benefits there. We have systems now with GPS. We've got huge advances. We've got things like IC, which is a product which is a predictive cruise control. So it knows when you're going up a hill, knows when you're going down a hill, and it adapts to maximize efficiency accordingly. If you then look at electric, lots of new innovations. The batteries are getting better every day, but that will be a continual improvement for the next 10, 20 years. They will just get better and better. But actually, once you've got an electric drivetrain, you can do different things. You don't need a battery, actually, or not much of a battery, because we can sort of go back to the future and create effectively trams. So one lane of the motorway has an electric cable over the top, and they just have a pantograph and off they go. They have a small battery for just getting them to the local delivery off the motorway. So that's a possibility. But then again, with electric automation, so autonomous vehicles are really the future. We already have vehicles in mines and quarries that are fully autonomous, no driver. They drive around, they carry stone and things around. On road, we've even got it. We've got a fully autonomous truck working in Sweden at the moment that drives around the port with containers, but also takes the containers from the port on the public roads to our factories. It's a test, but it's live. It's now. So that is coming. The last thing that I see in the future is new different business models. So today, pretty much, we sell a truck and someone buys it and they operate it. But in the future, like we see with music, like we see with everything now, maybe a subscription model is the way that this will go. So maybe people will subscribe for a vehicle, or maybe per mile, or maybe per ton. There's a million different ways of cutting that, but different models, certainly, to follow the sort of the Apple and the IP and the way other things have gone. It seems inevitable it will come to our industry.
Well, I think you've raised so many interesting points there, and I'm very grateful for you to bring those into the forefront of everybody's thinking, because we've seen a number of issues raised there just in your comments. We've got a range of alternative power supplies, LNG, hydrogen. We've got this link up with hybrids as well. And I think we mustn't forget that some of the changes that were made in diesel technology have made the engines very fuel efficient, very clean. So, for example, if you're driving cranes and other ancillary equipment on the vehicle, huge progress has been made there. And if they can be used alongside biofuels, that's a very exciting time. Then when you add into that autonomous vehicles, and we've seen the use of trials in platooning. And for those that don't know what platooning is, that is where you'll get several vehicles together. The first one may have a driver, but the others will all be autonomous. So the use of trucks of that nature at night has a huge benefit to society if that can be brought about. So Simon, thank you very much for your contribution today. It's been very insightful. I think you've really provided a lot of background knowledge and foresight as to the developments that are coming over the horizon. So we're very grateful to you for that. For those of you who have watched the webinar this morning, I hope you found it useful. And please don't hesitate to contact me or any of the team here at Shakespeare Martineau, and we'd be happy to help you with any queries that you've got. Thank you again for viewing this.